so I'd like to open this meeting of the Richmond Planning Commission for Wednesday, August 7th, 2024. Welcome, everyone. We have our planning commissioners, MMCTV, and we have a guest in the meeting room. So we can start with review and adjustments to the agenda, and I would like to lead off by saying that we need to table number 6, the most recent draft of the flood hazard overlay district amendments. We've had several pieces of information come in, a long letter from Bob Heiser, information from Tyler. Keith and Tyler and I had a meeting this morning to talk about some of these things. So this all came in after this was posted. The agenda was posted. So it's really not ready to go. There's likely going to be another draft based on some of this additional information. So I would like to postpone that, table it until our next meeting on August 21st. Any other adjustments to the agenda? So we'll go from number 5 to number 7. All right. Any public comment on non-agenda items? Which number 6 now is, by the way, a non-agenda item. All right. So let's, I don't see any hands or comments. Let's go to the minutes of 7/10/24. Were there any comments on the minutes of 7/10/24? We didn't review them last time because they were posted rather late and people didn't have a chance to review them. Any comments on those minutes? Okay, not seeing any hands or hearing any comments, we will accept those minutes into the record as written. How about the minutes of 7/17/24? Most recent meeting. Any comments or adjustments to those minutes? Okay, not seeing any hands or hearing any comments. We will accept those minutes into the record as written as well. So it looks like we've been joined by Jesse Heiser on the Zoom. Jesse, I don't know if you heard that we are tabling the item on the agenda, the review of the recent draft of the flood hazard overlay district amendments.
Good.
Until our next meeting.
Good.
So if you want to make a comment on it, you can make a comment under public comment on non-agenda items, or you can just wait and come to our next meeting. There will be different documents to look at.
Great, thank you. I don't have a comment at this time, but I do know my husband Bob is on his way if he hasn't already arrived, and okay, and may or may not wish to speak to that.
Okay, yeah, there'll be a complete discussion next time. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
As part of the public comment, I'm wondering if we have reached out to the 3 Parks Committee to see what they're looking at in their timeline, just because if we're postponing discussion in this another couple of weeks, they only have until October to make decisions. So if we have something in place well before then, you know, then the whole thing is a wasted effort. And maybe that's the intention. I don't know what's going on, but
yeah, well, we can certainly talk to them about their timeline. There's nothing really that can be talked about today. It's not ready to be There's nothing ready about it. So,
But has
can-
anybody's talked to what the three parks envisioned would be appropriate for this district?
not at the moment. We did originally, but we can talk to them again. Have you talked to them as the recreation?
No, I don't
committee?
think they've been doing anything since they're sort of in limbo.
Yeah, they're waiting to see what we come up with.
And what's our delay the result of?
The result of comments coming into the last draft after it was posted and too late to be discussed tonight. They're too complex and haven't been fully fleshed out. That's the delay. So we did start with talking to Tyler this morning about it, but it's
That's-
a bit on the, a bit on the late side to be talking about tonight since we just started.
I understand, but maybe if we could just try to think about the repercussions of the speed we're processing this through. And try to move as fast as possible in some decision making that comes to this district. I'd be curious to move things along as much as possible. I assure you that the Three Parks Commission is quite anxious because they still have to, whatever we decide, they still have to go out and get quotes and do whatever. And if none of that happens, then all the ARPA money just goes away. And I don't know if that's, I don't know, that's serious. I think that's a horrendous waste of an opportunity.
Well, the ARPA money won't be wasted. I'm sure it will go to something. But
We still have to have plans and quotes for everything. So if all this money is dedicated to something and has to be spent next year, what else is there that can be spent next year that the town can make a decision on by October if we don't have any zoning in place until late September?
yeah,
And
well,
if
we'll
we don't
see.
claim it and spend it on something and have it booked, then yes, we do lose that money.
The Three Parks Committee loses the money.
No, the
The
town
ARPA
loses the money.
Well, I don't know if that's true.
If it's not assigned and then spent in 2020 by, I think it's 20 assigned this year.
Yeah, so
and
there are many
dedicated
things
to
it
next-
could be assigned towards,
Oh, well,
presumably.
hopefully it's something, maybe it's a sidewalk you want. And we'll just bail on the park.
Don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not on that committee, but we can certainly, I understand that they have a timeline pressure. So we will do the best that we can to come up with something. If you have any, any ideas that you want to write up and send me along with the other comments that have been coming in, that's fine.
Nothing I haven't discussed already and put forward. I don't know where that went as far as the machinations behind the scenes, but I'm curious to see what's coming out, and it's very unfortunate we're not going to be talking about that tonight.
Yeah. And there's also a lot of discussion in the town about flooding since the recent flood event, obviously. There's a lot of additional concerns about flooding and discussion about how we should be dealing with it.
Right. Who's having those discussions?
So the select board is having discussions about flooding, yes?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Ongoing discussions. All right, so we'll do the best we can to work as quickly as possible, and we'll have a full discussion next time. So we have postponed the discussion.
Great. Is it too late to do a public comment on that?
You can do a public comment, hopefully a brief public
Yeah.
comment, since we'll have the discussion next time.
Thank you. I will be brief. So I'm Bob Heiser from Esplanade, and the last meeting I attended on July 10th, there seemed to be some disagreement as to the goal of the new language. And so it seems to me it might be worth, or I should back up and say, that seems to be even more pertinent a question now that I think this charge came out of the summit that was asked for by the Three Parks Committee. The Three Parks Committee at their last meeting have voted that they are not advocating for a paved path in the park. And they made it clear they're not advocating for things like a basketball court or other courts. So I think it's even more pertinent that the Planning Commission be clear on what the goals and objectives are of the new language before drafting and deciding upon that new language. So that's all I wanted to add.
Right, so we haven't heard anything from the Three Parks Committee, and we haven't heard from Mark, who is the Recreation Committee liaison, presumably with Three Parks, so, I mean, it would be good to have that information. I could go to the minutes of their last meeting, presumably there are some minutes.
And I don't know if those are posted, but I can send you the timestamp of the video that shows that vote. You happy to do it?
Yeah, do that. Yeah,
Okay.
send it to me, Bob.
Thank you very much.
Yep, thanks. See you next time.
Yep, thank
2
you.
weeks, yep.
And Bob, you know where I am.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so hopefully everybody will look at this information, and also I'll send out, or Keith will send out this link to if there's something in the Three Parks Committee meeting that we all need to know about that will help to inform our decision as well, then we could send that out to people and people could be ready to talk about it at their next meeting. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so any other public comment on non-agenda items? All right, so we will move on to number 5, which we would really like to finish up and get moving forward so that we can focus on some of these other things. Discuss the information received at the public hearing and the town attorney comments to finalize the village residential neighborhoods north and south and the accompanying amendments. So I would like to ask the commissioners if they have anything that they would like to discuss based on the public comments at the public hearing. It seems like, you know, there was quite a bit of discussion about setbacks, but we had both sides of the issue presented at that meeting, which to me landed us about where we were as a compromise position between having bigger setbacks and smaller setbacks. So that didn't seem to change anything for me. I don't know if it changed anything for anybody else. I didn't hear anything else at the public hearing that seemed to indicate that we needed to make any changes in these documents. But I'd like to know if any of the other commissioners had anything they wanted to add to that. Okay, so I'm not hearing anything. I think the hearing went well, and I think we had addressed all the major concerns in previous meetings with the neighbors and with others. So I feel good about that. So what we want to do with the attorney comments is to, since we have the time right now, is to go through the document looking at this short list of the comments that to me needed some kind of action. many of the attorney's comments, the attorney is Dave Rue, and many of his comments just related to wording shifts that didn't seem to have any impact, but he liked the wording better. So I thought we could go through and look at the ones that seem to need some kind of action. So if we could look at the PDF of the red line that has his comments on it, I'm hoping that we can agree tonight to amend our document so that we can approve it in an amended state based upon the attorney's comments, of which there aren't that many. All right, so this is the document that he marked up. Is it the document that he marked up? Where are the numbers that are different in the index? Or in the table of contents? Aren't there numbers?
Maybe down this way to here.
They should be all those numbers he marked in blue to be changed.
This is what was sent. So I have this.
All right.
These are Dave Rue's comments.
Okay, so he did alter all the numbering after we added these two districts in, because the pages after that obviously are all different. But Keith, so you're gonna have to go through and change the numbers. Now, the version that I have from Dave Rue has all those numbers changed. So I'm
Okay.
hoping that this has all the other comments. Okay, so on his page 33, the first comment appears.
There's your blue.
So I can't really read that from here.
I can magnify it
If you could make it a little bigger.
a little better.
Okay, so here's his first comment. And this occurs throughout the document where we have said behind the front of the building. And he felt it was important that we have this word, the building line. So if you picture a building that is not square to the road, that is catty corner to the road, there will be a corner of the building that is the thing that's closest to the road. It'll be a corner. So the building line basically goes through the corner because the front of the building may not be the nearest thing to the road. Does that make sense to people? And then he suggests this definition of building line, which I am suggesting that we put into our definitions section, the definition of this word building.
Can't read it.
Yeah.
There we go.
Can you make it any bigger, even bigger than that? A little bigger?
That's
Okay.
right about as far as you want to go.
All right. So minimum of 10 feet behind, not the front of the principal structure, because it could be the corner of the principal structure, which seems to make sense to me. Does anybody have a different take on that? It's just
Can you get
basically,
the definition all in the screen again?
okay, so go down a little bit. Oh, there.
Thank you.
So the definition he's suggesting is the front building line is the line parallel to the street line that passes through the point of the principal building nearest to the front lot line. So this would be a building where the point of the building that is nearest to the front lot line is not necessarily the front of the building, but it's a corner of the building. And the rear, the definition would be the line parallel to the rear lot line that passes through the point of the principal building nearest to the rear lot line. In the event that a property has two or more front lot lines, so presumably on a corner.
Right.
and no rear lot lines. The rear building line shall be the line that is both A, parallel to the side lot line that passes through the point of the principal building nearest to the side lot line, and B, parallel to the primary building facade. So I'm trying to picture that, actually, that rear one. The rear building line shall be the line that is parallel to the side lot line that passes through the point of the building nearest the side lot line, and also parallel to the primary building facade. Because the rear of the building should be parallel to the front of the building.
Clear as mud.
It's, so that, when I read it, I thought that I understood it. Now that I'm looking at it again, I'm not sure that I exactly understand that one, the rear one, but that is what he suggests that we do. So I'm going to defer to him on it. Does that make sense to you, Gary?
I don't quite get the second. The front makes sense to me. I think it's interesting that on a corner lot, there are no rear lot lines. There's just two fronts and two sides. I guess for some reason I always thought there'd be no side lots, but it doesn't really matter.
Right. Well, the two facades that face the two roads are the two front, and the other two are two sides. So
Yeah, it does make more sense than what I had always thought it would be interpreted. That's fine.
So if nobody has any objection to adding those definitions into section 7 and changing it wherever he suggests that we need to put building line instead of front of the building, which is quite frequently throughout this document, then if I don't hear any no's, we'll accept that as an amendment. Is that okay with everybody to proceed that way?
Anybody?
Okay. So we're going to approve that as an amendment. All right. So the next change, go down to the next blue. Is he just changed the word developer to applicant? That's fine with me. Does anyone have a problem with that? No. Okay, so yeah, just say no if you don't like it, because I can't see your faces or your hands on the Zoom screen. Can you see them? Or no.
We're
Okay.
sharing.
We're sharing this. Okay. So you'll have to yell no if you don't like it. Anyway, that one seemed to me to be an inconsequential one. As well as the next couple of ones. The next one that I felt was consequential and not just like a wording arrangement change was on his page 34. Okay. And it's back in the features of the VRNN. So can we go back to the features?
To the features? Or is it-
Yeah, yeah. I guess we skipped over it. 3.11 point at the beginning, 3.11.1.
So you got the purpose?
Yeah. Okay. So the question he asked a question. That's why I don't see it on here, but he asked a question about the round church.
Mhm. And that was down here. About the round church.
Oh,
It's right here on the round church.
okay, so it's VRNS. Okay, yeah. So he asked the question about the round church and said that if we had it as a feature and not as a use, not in the use category, then it's not permitted. The activities that happen there now are not permitted uses. And Gary, representing the Historical Society, said they didn't necessarily want them to be permitted uses. They wanted them to be part of the round church activities that are accepted as a feature of the district. And
Right.
Gary did not think that they would need to be a lot of additional permitting for other kinds of activities. So this seems to be that we don't need to move it out of features. They don't want to have to get permits.
Right.
They don't care that they won't be able to get permits for other kinds of activities, because what is listed is the kinds of activities that they foresee in their future. So
And what currently exists and
Right.
is allowed.
they exist, they're features of the district, they're facts. So anyway, so if everybody's good with that, we'll just leave that where it is and disregard his comment on that. All right, the next comment on page 35 was the requirement as standard and a development standard that all lots shall be served by water and sewer. And he didn't think that there was anything actually in the statute that allowed you to require this. So we made it a feature of the district that all lots are served by water and sewer, because that's a fact. And he, the attorney thought maybe under some vague statute, you could have it as a development standard, as a required standard, but he didn't really think that there was anything specifically that allowed us to require that. So we are just putting it as a feature. All lots are served by municipal water and sewer service. And this is what we had originally in this document, just the same as we have the speed limits will be slow and the residences are close together. This is just a fact of the district. Anybody have any problem with that?
The 9.
Yeah. Okay, so that's okay. The next one I have
63.
is page 63, and there's in between, the only ones are things like the building lot line, wherever it exists, is changed. There's no other real comments about this stuff. We get to page 63.
613, nope, 612D, 612D.
Wait,
Okay.
are you on page 63?
I am. See, 63.
Okay.
This is, the call out is D.
So in 6.1.2D, I suggested that we change developer to applicant, because in other places in this document, the attorney has crossed out the word developer and put the word applicant. So it seems like, for consistency's sake, you should do that everywhere. And he didn't point it out here, but so I felt that we should change developer to applicant.
Yep.
Anybody have a problem with that? Okay, page 101, the privacy language of the multifamily housing development standards.
Easy for you to say. 101,
Page 101.
613.7.
13.7. So he thought it was difficult to talk about privacy of the yards of overlook from buildings into outdoor spaces. So he suggested the following language instead of what we have, and removing C and D from 613.7. The language being that to change, to protect the privacy of neighbors by limiting or mitigating to the extent practicable the ability of those in the multifamily building from being able to see into the windows of dwelling units on abutting properties. He thought that was more specific, you know, and better because it was more specific.
Where did you just read that? What number is that?
That is I can't read that from here.
Well, it's right here. So it's right under the comments, right? See where my cursor is, Gary?
Oh, it's in the comments.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
so he
let me move it over. So it's this right here.
Yeah.
suggests that it's too vague and could have multiple meanings. And the point of having this in here to begin with was to help the neighbors of new multifamily buildings that were being imposed upon them, which they didn't really want, was to make them feel comfortable that they would have some privacy.
Right.
The language that we put in there was suggested by our housing consultant, Brandy Saxton. That's where that other language came from. He is thinking that it is too vague and that you can't really protect the privacy of backyards from people looking down into them. There's no way to do that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
The extent practicable.
Yeah, and so he also added to the extent practicable, and he added that in several other places in this section that we can talk about, to the extent practicable, because, you know,
Pretty vague.
that is pretty vague, and the word feasible and practicable occurs throughout this document, the whole zoning regulation anyway. The language is to the extent practicable or feasible. So what his language is just saying is that you can't make the windows of the new building look directly into the windows of the neighbors. So he thinks that is more specific than what we have.
I just think we're gonna be a lot of arguments about what's practicable. Or the other one is just, looks like they're trying to get a discussion going. Yeah, they're both vague. I don't know.
So do we want to use this in addition, this language, or instead
It is.
leave as is? I mean, I think he has a point about D and E being difficult, but you could say, I suppose, to the extent practicable. We could leave it the way it is if you want. We can alter it. What do people want to do with that?
I would add that it adds. This is from an administrative point of view. Kind of easy to apply, and it's also kind of easy to move it aside if need be. You know, all you really have to do is just apply the standard, and if it's not feasible or if it's not practicable, it's not required. And it's not required to begin with, you're required to look at it.
Are you talking about Dave Rue's comment or the way it is written already?
Either.
Okay,
So leaving C and D in, it's just like a recommendation to an applicant that they try to do this if it makes.
Yeah, because of the word feasible.
and it just says that they have to consider it. I mean, it doesn't actually have a standard per se. It just says which we
So
kind
it's
of
not,
did-
it's not really an enforceable language in any case.
well, what's enforceable is that they have to show that they've considered these things.
Okay.
Is vague enough.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, what constitutes showing that you've considered it? A reasonable person would say, well, look, here's where I put these windows. They are not looking directly into these other windows. I considered it and I didn't make the windows look directly into the other windows. But, clearly a developer who wasn't that interested in this could just say, well, I just considered it and it wasn't practicable. I had to put the windows looking directly into the other windows.
All right, so now to me, it looks like the first one has no standard. It's a conversation where the
Right.
developer explains why they did the design they did. The second one has a standard to the extent practicable, but to me, that has no real meaning.
Mhm.
So is it better to have a conversation or is it better to have a standard that people are gonna try to figure out because it doesn't have any meaning?
From an administrative point of view, we would want a standard, obviously, from an administrative point of view.
Yeah, so you'd rather have the no?
You'd rather have Dave's,
It really doesn't matter to me because it's really going to be up to the applicant to do that. And
Yeah.
the only thing that they have to show us as a zoning administrator or somebody who's doing is that they've considered it.
Yeah,
So it's pretty squishy, but it is a nod to the neighborhood. So, at least we're empathetic to this issue
right.
by this language. It has no teeth.
I don't care.
It's-
does anyone else have any preferences between conversation or a squishy standard to the extent practicable?
So hearing nothing, I would think you'd want to leave it as is.
Leave it as, all right. So the people want to leave it as is, say yes. Or can I have their people back so I can see them?
Yes.
Yes.
Stop shares.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, now I can see everybody. I can see your faces or names at least.
Okay, so that was, so we're keeping it as.
So
Let me just-
we're keeping the original language. Is that what people want to do?
Gotta take
Yes,
her
let's
out.
keep the original language.
Okay, that's fine.
I'll be right back.
So we will not change that. So. The attorney also suggests that we add the words to the extent practicable to 613.12 and 613.13. Let's see if I can move this here. Okay, 613.12. Freestanding mechanicals and utilities shall be landscaped or screened to prevent visibility from a public road to the extent practicable. Do we want to put that in or not? He doesn't have any note about why he wants to do that, but I don't know. It does make it more vague.
Yeah.
So, you know, we could leave it out and see what happens. And also under waste storage, he suggests that we screen it to the extent practicable. I think I'd be inclined maybe not to put that in, because just require it and see if,
Yeah.
see what happens, you know? Anybody have any feeling about that? Should we leave that out? We're talking about the two, to the extent practicables,
101, 102, language.
6:13:12 and 6:13:13.
It's waste storage.
Can we just say, no, you can't do this? From an
I think we
administrative.
should just say, I think we should just say no.
So leave it out?
Yep.
Okay, so we will not change that according to his, we will not add to the extent practicable. Because it does kind of like render the whole thing useless.
Yeah.
All right. So we're not going to change that. Page 102, 614.2H.
Right here.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So in this case, I do not want to put his added sentence in. Accessory dwelling units shall not be allowed on lots where there are duplexes or multifamily dwellings, for the reason that in our residential commercial districts, we have two primary structures allowed on a lot. So if one of them is a duplex and the other one is a single family home, if there's room on the lot and the density allows it, that single family home can have an accessory dwelling. So I don't think it is the case that they shall not be allowed on lots where there are duplexes. I don't think he was taking that into consideration. So I do not think we should add that sentence. It should read, only single family dwellings shall be allowed to have accessory dwelling units. It says nothing about what else is on the lot, because there might be a duplex on the lot in the RC districts.
So it's a nod to that specific district.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it isn't necessary. That second sentence. That what is necessary is that only single family dwellings shall be permitted, shall be allowed to have accessory dwelling units.
So it just ends after units.
It just ends after units. Just get rid of his blue.
Yeah, and get rid of the other red.
And the other red, the duplexes and multifamily dwellings.
Yeah.
It's a single sentence that reads in its entirety, only single family dwellings shall be allowed to have accessory dwelling units. So if everybody's okay with that, yes. We will not be changing that one. Okay, and then in section 7, there was the addition of the building line definition. It's on page 105, which we've already talked about. So
Right.
we have that definition. Everybody was okay with that. So that's approved, and changing it wherever it was necessary in the whole document.
15.
Okay, then on page 115, he questioned the word structure to wonder what this zoning should do with tennis, pickleball, and basketball courts, which obviously is relevant in other conversations. Anyway. So we don't really talk about those things. We do talk about flat on the ground improvements, under on ground improvements. So my feeling is, in order to deal with those other types of paved areas, what we need to do is make a couple of changes to the terms on ground improvement and impervious surfaces, and add any other paved surface. So if you go back to page 108, where the definition of impervious surface is, it should say,
Almost there. Boom.
it should say, including but not limited to, well, I'll start again. Impervious surface, a surface from which precipitation runs off rather than infiltrates into the ground, including but not limited to a roof or a paved or unpaved, such as gravel, road, driveway, sidewalk, walkway, a parking area, or any other paved area, or a natural
Just on
stone
the surface,
surface. So any other paved area is going to take into account such things as a tennis court or a paved basketball court
Pickleball.
or a pickleball court, such that, so let's say somebody on their lot wishes to have a pickleball court paved. That is going to count as an impervious surface, and it is going to count in the lot coverage because it's a paved surface, like those other things. And also in on-ground improvements, it needs to say, or any other paved area.
Because impervious surfaces in that definition.
Right, because impervious surfaces are integral to the definition of on-ground improvements. So it would read, a man-made impervious surface that is flat on the ground, such as a driveway, parking area, sidewalk, walkway, patio, or any other paved area. That's an on-ground improvement.
It's just clarifying what would count.
And it would count for lot coverage, but it is not going to count for setbacks.
Correct.
So you can put your pickleball court right next to your neighbor's house.
Oh.
If you want. All right, so does anyone have a problem with that? I think that solves his concern about questions that might arise about those other paved surfaces. And then just for our understanding of it, but we don't need any changes, the structures that are above the ground are going to be accessory structures. So for instance, the posts that hold the net of a tennis court, those are accessory structures. They're not on ground. They're not on ground improvement. They're accessory to the use of the paved area.
And requires setbacks,
And they require setbacks, the posts.
which would move a court.
Well, you could have the court there, but you couldn't have the net there.
That's true. You could have one on the back side of the court there.
Yeah.
That's true.
So,
But if you have a fence around it,
right.
and that's a whole nother thing.
Okay. So does anybody have any concerns about that? Is that okay? Can we approve that as an amendment? The addition of or any other paved area to both impervious surfaces and on-ground improvement.
Pretty straightforward.
Okay, I'm not hearing any no's, so I'm going to say we are approving that as an amendment. Okay, then the only other one
Structure.
was page 115. Where and this is kind of optional, I think. We have used the word temporary housing for those at risk of homelessness, which are now defined in state statute as emergency shelters. So if we want to show that we understand that, or, be compatible with state statutes, we can add in parentheses, also called emergency shelters, after temporary housing for those at risk of homelessness. Or we can replace emergency shelters we can use that to replace temporary housing for those at risk of homelessness. I just put them both in. I thought we could put them both in so that, anyway,
Consistency. Yep.
we have a little ink budget for that.
Yes. Haven't heard that in a while.
So are we there yet? Oh, yes, there we are. You're looking at it. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts about that? Okay. So we have then approved a few amendments. Yeah, and the building line one is wherever it occurs in the text, and also the applicant to the developer. So if everybody's good with that, then we can vote with a motion that is in the meeting materials. Somebody could make a motion to approve these VRN districts and their associated amendments with the addition of the changes that we have made just now at this meeting tonight. If anybody would like to make a motion to that effect, that would be very good.
It's up on your screen if you wish to. That out of the way.
I can take a stab at it unless somebody else wants to.
Sounds great, Chris.
Oh, you go, Vice Chair.
Yeah.
All right, I would like to I hereby move that the Richmond Planning Commission forward to the Richmond Select Board zoning amendments as described below, and to facilitate the local legislative public hearing requirement as described in section 4384, subsection E. Modifications to the regulations to include RZR in parentheses, to include a revision to section 2.3, zoning district map, newly proposed zoning districts denoted as the Village Residential Neighborhood North, parentheses, section 3.11, and Village Residential Neighborhood South, parentheses, section 3.12. As well, I think there's a as missing there, as well as the introduction of a new clarifying section to align with Act 47, section 6.14, residential density, period. Additional revisions are also proposed to the current section 6.1, parking and loading, section 6.13, multifamily housing development standards, section 7, definitions of the Richmond zoning regulations, and any amendments agreed to at this hearing, August 7th, 2024.
Okay,
Did-
is
Did
there,
we pick up that extra, that missing as in the middle there?
put an ad, yeah, we'll put an as
As
well
well
as,
as, yeah.
as well as,
Okay.
got that?
Well, it's on PDF.
I'll second the motion, including the as.
Okay, that's Ian.
Yes.
Okay, Ian is seconding. Any discussion about this motion? Can you get me the picture of the people back? Okay. So not hearing any discussion, we'll take a vote and I will ask each individual what their vote is. Ian,
Yay.
okay? Chris,
Yay.
Allison. Allison, would you like to vote to approve this motion?
Let me jump ahead and say aye.
Mark? Aye.
Just to keep it
Okay.
moving. Allison will catch back up.
And I will vote aye.
And Allison, you're muted.
So Allison is muted. Perhaps she is gone to take a break. We'll give her a minute or two while we rest. Thank you, Gary. Okay. Allison, do you vote to approve the motion that was made?
Yes,
Okay, good. So it is unanimously approved. We will forward this
With them.
Thank you. With a memo to the select board. And we will make the changes in the document that we just discussed. Clear up the numbering so that the page numbering is now correct since we have added some pages.
Mhm.
Um,
Oh, there's a bunch of technical things in these.
Yeah.
Yes.
and the technical things will happen with all the warnings and all that kind of stuff and whatever we have to do,
Yep.
notifying the neighboring towns.
It's by statute.
Great. So that is good. I think that was a good effort.
All right.
Okay. So our next task
What?
is to number 7.
So we should discuss the conversation we had with Dave Rue.
Yes, so Keith and I and Dave Rue met. Do you want this, by the way? Just in case.
Yes.
We met and we had a conversation of about an hour to ask the questions about density bonuses that were brought up at our last meeting. And the questions basically that we asked the attorney was, I explained to him that we were considering amending the Richmond zoning regulation to incorporate a residential density bonus scheme. So we asked about the scheme in general. Are we authorized to do this? Can we have a density bonus scheme? Can we have parking as a density bonus? Can we have just any kind of parking? Can we have leased parking? What are the restrictions around the density bonus scheme? And basically, he said that based upon the statutes, you can have pretty much anything you want for a density bonus scheme.
Above and beyond the base density.
Above and beyond the base density. You cannot require, for instance, parking to be provided because that subverts Acts 47, but you can offer it as a density bonus. As long as you don't require something, you can have it in your density bonus scheme.
Yep.
So that answered our basic question, which is, what can we offer? You can offer anything that you want, as long as you don't require that they do it. that they have it. So the draft that I put in the package for this time took into consideration Chris's comments that he would be in favor of requiring, of causing any increased density to be bonus density, but to sweeten it so that the developer would be more likely to take you up on it. So that is the draft that you have in front of you. Is there are more market rate units available?
Pull that up.
Yep. For each bonus unit that they create. And that parking is,
Which density bonuses?
yeah, it's the density bonuses document. And that parking is one of the things that we regard as being useful to have as a density bonus. And it's just any kind of parking. So I actually put in this document for discussion tonight that you could either do leased parking that would be able to provide you with some density bonus units. And the appeal of that would be that the developer or applicant got money for it. It's leased, so they would earn something. So possibly that would make it interesting. Or you could just have parking that's required, and they wouldn't have to go through any documenting of it being leased or anything like that. It's just parking that is made available to the public. So we could look at that, I guess, first, if you go on down to the parking as a bonus. So we could think about that. Here, I just offered it as either kind of a parking bonus. And I put in a random number of parking spaces. So we can talk about the numbers. The other bonuses, if you go back up in the document, the other bonuses were ones that we had already talked about. The workforce housing and the adaptable or senior housing, those two. And in the original version of this document, it was just you got one unit for one unit. So if you made a senior housing unit, you got one other unit. So to sweeten that, I put that you got two market rate units for one senior or workforce. And if you made an actual affordable unit with the income sensitivity piece and all of that, then you got 4 units to make it even plausible that anybody would feel that that was worthwhile. So all these numbers are, up for grabs. I still am of the opinion that we should give them at least some base density increase and then the density bonuses, but I'm going to throw it open for discussion here.
Well, this is good news. I've subsequently discovered this is not directly related, but it's interesting that building codes can actually also do requirements above and beyond federal standards for appliance efficiency, for example, as long as it's not requiring it, but an option that allows a path to compliance. So that sort of makes sense to me now in terms of the overall legal structure of this. I like the approach. I like the approach of having all increase in density linked to bonuses. One thing I will say though, and for some reason I thought we were beyond this already, but it appears not, is that to have a a density bonus linked to a rent, maximum rent being charged that is not also linked to a income screening is pointless in my mind, or actually worse than pointless, because it doesn't ensure that people that actually can't afford to live in town would be able to live in town. And it actually creates a situation that could be an invitation to corruption of some sort, because it's who controls the access to these cheaper units. I think the zoning in Heinsberg, for example, I'm not aware of any town that's looking at something like this that isn't also combining income screening as part of it. Heinsberg certainly is. So I just want to throw that out as I applaud the direction this is going. I like the overall structure, but when it comes to the affordable housing aspect of it, I think we need to be careful not to create a problem here, and careful to structure something that's actually going to result in the overall goals of what we're trying to do. Thank you.
So, yeah, so why do you not feel that controlling the rent to lower than market rate is useful? Whoever rents it.
Why would that not then just become a benefit for friends and family of either the developer or other people in the building, for people that could afford to pay market rate? The whole point is to provide affordable housing to people who would not otherwise be able to pay market rate.
Yeah, of course. So I don't really see that as the whole point. I see that as one set of people who would benefit the true affordable housing. But keeping rates low in general is a way to, attract people who might not want to spend more money on rent. So it's been tried in many areas as a way to put a damper on excessive spiraling out of control rents. So to me, it works for attracting people who might not be able to, they're not really, a lot of these people that we talk about are not going to fit into an affordable housing necessarily category. They just need something that's more affordable.
I don't think we're talking about that kind of federally subsidized affordable housing. Okay, let's set that aside. But what we're talking, I guess, what I don't understand and what I don't hear from what you're saying is how it sounds like we both want people who would otherwise not be able to afford to live in Richmond to do that. But how do you ensure that they actually have access?
Well, this is sort of based on what Buttermilk has touted as an advantage, saying that they have maintained rates at this lower level of 80% AMI. So to me, that seems beneficial to have some units that rent for less. We can't, we're not offering in this section to assure that it's people who can afford it. But it's, to me, it's providing an option that is more affordable than the other rents, at least the other rents. So if some of their rents are more expensive, then they will have some cheaper rents. They will be renting things that are slightly less expensive. Why is that not a benefit? It will attract people who are looking for that. It may attract other people as well, but
I'm sorry, that just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. Well, why is rent control a strategy in many places? In many communities, rent control is a strategy for maintaining lower rents.
Well, if you're talking about traditional rent control, it's a strategy in not that many places, and mostly large cities, and it's had mixed effects. I don't think that's what we were. I don't think we were ever talking about that kind of traditional rent control here. At least I
Well,
wasn't.
it's a form of rent control.
Well, yeah, but I think you're right that the traditional rent control kept rents down, but for market rate renters. And it's had, I'm most familiar with how it's implemented in New York City. It's had all kinds of problems. What I thought we wanted
It's
to
allowed
do,
many people, by the way, it has allowed many people to live in New York City who would not otherwise have been able to live in New York City.
right? No, I'll agree with that, but nobody's talking about implementing it on that kind of scale in Richmond. I mean, how many units do you think would end up being covered by this at the end?
Well, it's a small scale, but everything is going to be small scale here. I mean, if you look at the actual affordable units, they're only going to pick one or two, probably. And they can't pick more than 6, because if you pick more than 6, it throws you automatically into the other way of doing affordable housing, which is, the affordable housing development, which is 20% of the units, and they get the extra height and the extra 40% density, et cetera, et cetera. So they can't pick more than 6 for a 30-unit building. That's 20%. So, they're not going to pick that many. And they don't want to give up their parking. They really hate the idea that they will be reducing their parking. So they're not going to pick many of those either. So I think none of these things is going to actually result in a lot of density bonus units being created.
Well, I think we don't know until we finalize this and offer it to them. But yeah, I agree, the total number is not going to be large, and that's my point. That this is not going to. We're not talking about. If we did, I'm going to call it rent control because that's what it is. If we practice rent control at that very small level, I don't think it's going to have any impact on on who can afford to live in Richmond.
Well, it's going to keep the rent at a lower than market rate level. So that maybe a few people can afford to live there who wouldn't have been able to pay market rent.
Well, they theoretically could, Virginia, but I'm saying that those people who could afford to won't necessarily have access to it unless you address that side of the equation as well.
Yeah, well, I think it's addressing a different group of people than the people who are going to be, who actually are guaranteed by the affordable housing scheme, which addresses the income sensitivity. This is just workforce housing is just cheaper housing. That's all.
I thought what we wanted to do was address the town employees, police officers and teachers who don't make enough to be able to pay market rents in town.
Yeah, well, they'll have to look for these apartments. If they're going for the rent control departments, they would have to look for them when they came on the market and apply for them. I don't know that they're going to qualify for actual affordable housing.
Well, no, they're not, but this is the missing middle, right? They don't qualify for federally subsidized affordable housing, and they can't afford market rates in Chittenden County. That's the whole problem.
So we're providing some cheaper units.
And all I'm saying is let's make sure that they get a crack at it. Let's screen the income of folks so that it's folks in that income bracket that we're targeting at who actually get access. We're going to go through the hassle and hopefully, you know, convince Buttermilk to do this. Let's make sure that it doesn't just create cheaper apartments for, I don't know, software engineers. And I'm not picking on software engineers specifically. I'm just assuming that they get paid better than policemen.
Does anyone else have any comments or discussion about this? Would anyone else like to talk about it?
No.
I don't think it's going to be useful to put all of our effort into making Buttermilk have true affordable housing, but we can offer it.
I think you're mixing definitions here. I think we're inventing creatively a solution to the problem that we have. This is not traditional affordable housing, and I don't care how many times you say it, Virginia, it's just not.
Well, we're offering the 4-to-1 bonus level is traditional affordable housing.
Well, that's what you proposed. I mean, that's a whole nother issue about whether that's the right bonus level or not, but I'm just talking
Yeah.
about the
So we're
income
offering
stream.
that. We're offering some of that, and we're offering some of these other things as well. The workforce housing, which is different. The parking and the senior units.
I wonder,
And
I was just wondering if there couldn't be some sort of like 2-stage bonus to that, you know, as long as, because this section is going to be a ultimately, ideally, townwide universal Benny. And so in those cases, you know, in this instance, I don't know which is better, but what if we did at least offer to folks out there, okay, you get 1-for-1 if it's workplace housing or workforce housing, and you get 1-for-4 when it's regular, you know, Chris's argument, you know, the regulated, more stringent income sensitive option.
yeah, well, that's essentially what we've got here, except we're offering 2-to-1 for those other things, because I don't see how 1-to-1 is really gonna be attractive.
Oh, if it's not attractive, it's not attractive. But you know, we gotta also be thinking about the rest of the town. You know, so if it, you know, I think, you know, I don't know if somebody was developing a lot somewhere else and was putting in 4 units on Main Street, maybe maybe that added perk would be worth enough for them to make workforce housing at 1-to-1, or maybe they could do some workforce housing and, you know, some affordable, really rent controlled, or no, that's the wrong term, Chris, and I apologize, but income sensitive, lockdown affordable housing. And, you know, honestly, I think 4-to-1 is as a general rule, is pretty generous perk for those choosing to go with 1-to-1.
Well, it's got to be financially feasible. So they've got to be able to make up that income and show the bank that they can make up the income that they're going to not receive from the true affordable housing. It's got to be appealing to them. I mean, I know Alex in Heinsberg is you know, he's found it difficult to make it attractive enough to developers, but
Is he the one who's doing, he's doing 4-to-1 bonus level?
what did he say in that letter? I mean,
Seems, I don't remember seeing that. I'm sorry, I apologize.
Yeah.
The inclusionary zoning was basically, I'd say a non-starter, but that was not a vehicle that was successful in Heinsberg.
Right.
That was the main point of his,
of his letter.
yeah, and it's going down the path of multiple avenues by which to get the developer involved. And that income sensitivity is an issue. No doubt about that.
Well, right, and if it's locked in, maybe they deserve a better bonus. But if you're not locking it in and you're just building small units that are inexpensive, yeah, and calling it workforce housing and getting a 2-to-1 benefit for that, that doesn't seem like
Right.
you know that big a question, particularly if you're already looking at building super small housing and calling that workforce housing, which is what the classification is. We either have something that's regulated and reviewed and approved, or we have basically a whim of a cost. And on a whim of a reduced cost, I don't know you should get that big a perk for it anywhere. I'm not talking just about Jolina. I'm talking anywhere. You know, you build a shack, you know, a mini house and say, oh, because of that, I get to put 2 more units on this piece of property. How many people want to live in a mini house? How many people want to, you know, live in 900 square feet? Maybe there's enough, but in Richmond, even though there's no mass transit, but then you take that outside of the village. Do you really want to be giving that away just because somebody built a mini house on the property and they get to throw up another couple units on it? Doesn't, you know? Is it possible to do workforce housing where, okay, you can have 1 unit, but if you want to do workforce housing, you get 2 units? You get an extra unit for it? Because honestly, if that's where we're going to go, I can pretty much guarantee you, if you're trying to get all the these other things in our downtown hub on the Jolina core property, it's going to be a pretty easy sell to go even 1 for 1, let alone 2 for 1. Workforce housing, that won't be the limitation because they'll just, you know, classify it as some sort of undefined workforce housing and get all the density that they could possibly allow in the density bonus limit.
So Mark, while you have the mic here, what do you think about the parking?
I've said it repeatedly that I think parking is a great perk. How many spots per location? I don't know, but honestly, that's something that goes outside of Jolina court too. There are other properties out there, and there is a shortage of public parking. Now I know everybody's telling me the cars are going to go away and we're all going to ride bikes, but I don't see that happening anytime too soon.
So what do you think about the difference between public parking and leased parking and the number here, the numbers?
I don't think leased parking should be leased parking is tough to wrap your hands around. How do you define
Well,
that? What do you do? What if you don't lease it out, you know? Because
Well,
you
it
want to
has to
lease
be
it at
offered.
$1,000 a day. Well, all of a sudden, okay, you don't have to have any extra parking because nobody's gonna lease it at that rate. And then what
But
do you,
how is that good for the developer? I mean, that wouldn't be good for the developer. The developer, if they're going to invest in making these parking spaces that are actually sort of expensive to make and maintain, they're gonna wanna, you know, use them for whatever purpose, either the public parking or the leased parking, they're gonna wanna use them. I don't think they're gonna charge huge amounts of leasing and just
Yeah,
have.
maybe
sit
that's,
empty.
but either way, leased parking should be considerably less than public parking. And there's more properties than Jolina Court in Richmond Village, or geez, you could imagine seeing it out by anywhere where there's a limit of public parking, along the Huntington River. Down by the bridge or up the hill or whatever. Those
Yeah, well,
could,
that's the question.
could be
Do we
obviously-
want this town-wide, or, I mean, that's another question. If
I think
this,
we have to be talking about this section being town-wide, and we need to be thinking about these regs, not just
yeah,
Jolina Court.
yeah, well, the way it's written, the section is for any part of the town, so any of these benefits. Anybody else have anything? Ian, what are you thinking about this whole thing? I know that your preference is just to increase the base density and make it simple, and I am pretty much on that page, but what are you thinking about here?
Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm thinking. I would say I'm not really interested in bonuses at all.
Okay. Allison, what do you think?
I agree. All right, am I on or not? Let's see.
Yep, you're on.
Yep, can
Yeah,
hear you.
okay, I agree that I'm not much interested in bonuses. And I also just have to say that I have a general concern about the fact that we've had so many floods in the village. And I have a general reticence to further development in the village when, in particular, we have all these floods that are happening. I mean, we don't have a lot of flat space in the village that's available. We've got the Winooski River, Route 2, and steep slopes. And I'm just concerned that people invest a lot of money in developing some of these places and that they're going to get flooded. I think we've had a bad scare with floods.
Okay, so just focusing on Jolina Court for a minute, Allison, would
Yeah.
you give an increase in the base density? Is that what your position is? So you said you're not that interested in the density bonuses? Are you favoring
Right.
giving an increase in the base density as Ian has suggested, or
I
not give
I would
Ian
be
density? or-
I would personally be interested in the most conservative approach that we could make to increasing density. That's just my opinion.
And what is that? What is the
What does
most?
conservative mean in this case, Allison?
Not much.
So you want to have something that's restrictive and doesn't allow increases in density. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I have problems with that too. I feel torn. I feel torn between the fact that they've invested money already in it so far, and that we don't want anyone to be terribly damaged by that. But I have a real reticence over the fact that we've had so many floods. It seems utterly spooky to me that we had just 1 year to the date from the bad flood that we had a year ago in July. And I live on the Huntington Road, and that road is still being repaired. It's been repaired repeatedly over a year. I mean, what about the village? I just worry about this. That's all.
So
I'm
this
Oh,
is
Virginia,
out
I-
of the floodplain. Allison, this is a building that's out of the floodplain. So
I think
at
the
some point-
floodplain's gonna be redefined.
Yeah.
So what is your feeling about Jolina Court? You would not like to give them any further density? Is that the way you feel or what?
No,
It-
I don't feel that way. I'd like to give them a fair chance to increase the density very moderately, but I think we need to be careful, that's all.
And
I
so
don't-
what would you think of as a moderate increase in density? You're gonna have to make a decision at some point, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know
I
that
know,
you
and I know
understand
that,
all
and
the ramifications, but
I know I'm not being helpful. This is just my concern, that's all.
so if we suggested that we increase the base density, let's say to 18 units per acre from 15 units per acre, would you vote in favor of that or not in favor?
Yeah, I would vote for that.
Okay, and if we suggested increasing it to 20 units per acre, which would give them an additional 15 units, which is what you had originally supported, would you be in favor of that? If we just
Yeah,
increased base density to
I
20
would-
units per acre,
I would be in favor of that. Yeah,
you would be willing to vote for that?
yeah.
All right. So there are three of us on this board who would go in that direction to just give them an increase in base density. It may
could
be
add,
that we have to
this-
compromise with giving them some increase and some density bonus units. But it seems like a compromise is needed here because we have a divided commission on this issue.
I want to make a correction to something that was said earlier too about Heinsberg's zoning. Their inclusionary zoning dates back to 2009 and is still very much in effect. Alex Weinhagen's email to you of May 7th described the process that they're going through now of revising it because they haven't seen too many developments that were large enough to actually trigger it.
Right.
So they're doing a couple things, which I mean I don't need to go through it in detail, but I can if you like. But the point being that income screened inclusionary zoning is in place in 4 Vermont communities, most of them quite nearby us here. And Richmond wouldn't be doing anything unusual by following the lead of our neighbors.
Well, it's Burlington, South Burlington,
Heinsberg.
third one. Yeah, Heinsberg is the only one of a small size community that's not a big city.
Well,
Burlington, South Burlington.
I don't know
is
what your
the
point
best?
is there, Virginia. It's being done.
Oh, it's definitely being done, Chris. There's no doubt about that. I mean, if you know, obviously, if you look at the email, he states that it's a tool. And it's a tool that he supports. It's just that they haven't seen a ton of subsidized housing going in there.
Well, neither would we. I mean, these are,
Right.
you know, we're talking about larger buildings, right? And we're a small town that doesn't have a lot of larger buildings. So, yeah,
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
that's,
I mean, if you were to go down the path of inclusionary zoning as a density bonus, which is typically how it's applied, then I think that's what we're doing here to a certain extent. But I think we're talking about what is the extent of the bonus seems to be sort of a sticking point too, which is fine.
Well,
It's a tool.
we're not requiring it. I mean, you can require it. Inclusionary zoning can be required.
Hmm.
That, to me, is out of our realm, of the realm of possibility
Mhm.
for us. We don't
I-
have projects that size.
well, I don't understand that. Why do you say it's outside of the realm of possibility?
I think we looked into that. We tried to look into that on the planning commission before. And we just didn't make any progress with it.
Well, I think that there's opposition by some members of the planning commission, but I wouldn't say that it's impossible or unfeasible. It's just the question is, do we want to move ahead with that or not?
Yeah, I don't think we should do it for this project, which has been now a year that we've been working on this. I don't, they are not interested in affordable housing, first of all. And, it's going to be, even with the density bonus question where it's optional, questionable whether they're going to be able to build this building.
Virginia, if that's the way you feel about it, then simply do the vote, send it to the select board, and we'll see what happens there. I think we've had testimony by people from the community. You've heard from me. You've heard from members of the select board.
So that's why the density bonus scheme is here, is to allow them to get some additional units by way of density bonus. The select board has said they're not opposed to giving some density increase, and they want to have these density bonuses as well. So that's what this compromise is. It's some density bonus units and some.
And I'm talking about inclusionary zoning specifically as part of the density bonus discussion. And I don't have any opposition. I support the idea of density bonuses. I mean, I've consistently done that. But it's how do you award that additional density?
So, Ian, do you have anything else
yeah,
you'd like to
question?
say?
I mean,
about this?
Like, this would be a question to Chris and to Mark, I guess. Like, if you can't have it your way, would you just rather see no buildings built?
No, of course not. I mean, there's nothing, again, to prevent them from building a building under the current rules. They want to change the rules.
Well, they can't get financed.
That's what they've told us, okay? And I believe them, okay? But all that I'm saying is that if we want to make this a more financially attractive situation for the developers, we should be asking the question, as I think we are, of how can the town also achieve our goals? And I certainly don't think it's appropriate to just give them an increase in density essentially for nothing.
Except we get more housing. That's what we get.
I understand that, yeah.
And housing is scarce at all levels. Housing is scarce. So why is that not a bonus for the town to get more housing rather than less housing on this piece of property?
My views on this are on record. I'm not going to repeat myself again.
I'll take a very quick stab at that. And that is that the 45 units housing, I'm okay with getting rid of the commercial component and keeping it at 45. They want to go ahead and do that at that level. That's fine. I'm not crazy about anything going over 45 anyways, because I can't fully grasp the impact it will have on the community. And I don't think any of us really can. But everybody's insisted on saying, oh, we need to go way higher than 45. Then I do think if we're going to go higher than 45, we should be looking at helping the town out with some of its issues, which is affordable housing, workplace housing, and parking. If and the select board is all over more than 45, and I get that. They do, but they also want these other perks that come with it. And what we're setting up the system to be is for them to get all the extra housing without any of the other perks. And I definitely came away from that select board attended meeting with the impression that they're good with more housing, but they expect a little something back. In as blunt a term as you can put it. And providing incentives that would benefit the town in at least one way is a reasonable option. If they don't, well, it's 45 units. And if I'm wrong and everybody else is right about 45 units not being a big impact, then we'll be looking at expanding the development and increasing the density for the rest of the property, which they still obviously have plans on developing. It's always been at least a minimum 3 building development. What's that third building going to be? What's it going to look like? I don't know. But if they're not going to use up all this density because they don't want to take any density bonuses, then I think that they could survive and get approval. And this is my interpretation of what they have said, that they can do it. They just can't do it with the commercial. The commercial is what's killing the project right now. So fine, we put in density bonuses that are pretty stiff and help benefit the company, the town. And if they don't want to take them, they don't have to. They can go ahead with their game plan of 45 units without anything extra. And there'll be potential capacity to add additional housing at some point. And maybe then they will want to renegotiate. They want to they got to get some money going. They got to get a cash flow so that they're profitable. And once they're making some bank, they may be more flexible with the other buildings. But if we just give them everything they need and then for nothing, which is what you guys are talking about, then we will end up with nothing other than, yes, we will end up with more affordable housing. But 45 units, another 30 units is, another 1% population of Richmond. I think that's pretty decent for one property, particularly at its location. I'm sorry, I'm rehashing.
Yeah, okay. Thanks. Ian?
What is 45 units? Is that 15 density?
Yeah, that's 40. He's talking about 45 for the whole property, which is 15 units per acre,
Which is the current base zoning.
which is current. Yeah. He's not talking about 45 for this building, right, Mark?
Yeah,
You're
right.
talking about 45 for the
I'm
whole
talking
property.
about the pre-existing zoning
Yeah,
at 15 units.
And there's 14 in the existing building.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So it's another 31 with another 35 to 40 people at least. That's a solid 1% of the current town population. I think that's a reasonable contribution for Richmond, contribution to the housing shortage. Is everybody else doing that? I don't think so.
So Virginia, and Buttermilk is saying that number is not high enough for them to make sense financially.
Mhm.
What
Yes.
what is their number?
My impression again, and I don't know if either
Well,
one
just
of
in
them bring up the
answer
data,
to Ian's question was their number was they wanted to have an additional 24 units in building 2.
but do they need 24? Yes, that's what they would like in one additional building and replace the commercial property with another 24 units in that same building. Because yeah, sure, cram it all in. They would like as much as they possibly could. So of course that's what they want. But what do they need
Just
to get
providing more housing,
That's
but-
an entirely different story. To get 31 extra units in downtown Richmond.
All right. So Mark, you would be for just requiring the density bonus scheme for parking. Did you think of the numbers? The 5 parking spaces per unit.
I like that. That's a strong number. Should it be less if they're leased versus public? Yes.
Even though it
Or,
achieves. the
or I'm sorry,
same goal.
maybe it should be, excuse me, it should be more. I'm sorry, I had that backwards in my head. There should be public parking should be more valuable to the town
Yes.
and therefore provide any developer an added benefit. So you provide 2 public spots. That's great. If you don't want to go public and you want to lease it out, then I don't know. 10? I don't know. 5?
Okay, well, we've got 5 for the public right now, but and what do you think about the workforce housing question?
I think that should be a minimal perk. If you want to do that, I'm not opposed to it because I know you guys want to give them opportunities, and that is certainly their strongest one. But they're already going there with a whole bunch of
Well,
workforce housing costs, which is basically small units with
So
no
you'd go 1-to-1.
regulatory purchasing. I would keep it low for that.
Can we just call it market housing, please? That's just a lot clearer.
Thank you, right? Inexpensive market housing.
Well,
Is what-
that's contradictory, actually, in Chittenden County right now. I'm sorry, Mark.
Well, workforce housing is cheaper market housing.
Yes.
You don't agree with that, Chris, I know, but I think
Well, it's not luxury market housing, but that's not affordable. And I mean that not in any kind of regulatory sense of the word, but it means that people that
It's
work in
workforce.
town can't live in town.
Middle income.
what
Middle income.
middle income
is the
housing.
term.
We'll call it middle income housing.
Yeah,
Youth housing.
All right, so
Be too many parties.
could be youth, or it could be senior. What do you think about the senior housing, Mark, while you have the microphone?
I love the idea of it, but again, if you're gonna offer true senior housing, yes, you get an added perk. You're just gonna put a couple supporting using 2x4s rather than insulation behind the shower wall so that you can properly mount a shower support. Well, that's not a lot of extra effort, and that's not really warranting of a lot of extra bonuses. So
It's actually equipped.
Yeah, it's equipped. And
So
it's
there's-
55 and older typically.
There's a whole list, and it could be restricted to renters who are 55 or older if we wanted to go there.
So you're supporting
That's different.
age restrictions, but not age screening, but not income screening.
Well, income screening is offered under the affordable housing with the 4-to-1. And the middle income is just a different kind of housing, so.
Do we have something that, and I'm sorry, you may have given this already, that describes what the incremental of this definition of elderly housing is over ADA compliant?
Well, I got that hasn't been
Fleshed out. No.
fleshed out
Yeah.
yet, but I did get some information from the Cathedral Square folks about the kinds of things that involves, and it's
Listen,
housing for people who are physically restricted. That's the adaptable part of that.
It's universal.
But the grab bars are in. It's not like just the walls are there to support it. Step-in showers. These are some of the things that are on this list from the Cathedral
Just a show.
Square people. Under sink cabinets that can be removed for future wheelchair use. So the plumbing has to be arranged in a certain way so that the sink can be accessible underneath. There need to be peepholes in the doors at a lower level as well as a regular level, no thresholds between the rooms. So anyway, there's a list. We haven't fleshed that out, depending on whether we want to go there or not, but
I think that would have to be defined before we could figure out what appropriate bonus density would be for it.
yeah. Well, that could be done and,
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you folks are amenable to that, we would flesh it out. We just want to get to the point where, what are you amenable to?
Well, my first priority, I hope that's clear, is making income screened affordable housing available. But I have nothing against elderly housing as well.
Oh, you've certainly been consistent, and I would say, so when you're talking about true affordable housing, you're talking about subsidized housing.
Okay, let's be
Okay.
very clear here. Okay, I am not talking about affordable subsidized housing in the sense of federally subsidized or even state subsidized. This is self-subsidized. I think the probably the best way to understand it is the inclusive zoning. I like that term. That, you know, I think that where we've seen that applied, it contains most of the elements that we're talking about here. It does not require the involvement of affordable housing agencies, the state or the federal government. Okay, it is implemented through our zoning locally.
it's self-subsidized. The subsidized refers to the fact that those apartments don't really pay for themselves. So somebody else has to be supporting them.
Well, it's the rent structure of the building. Yeah.
Yeah, it's subsidizing them. So so what about the parking, Chris?
Well, I'm certainly open to talking about parking. I don't feel the same urgency about it that Mark does, but I'm certainly willing to entertain it in the mix.
So 5 spaces for 1 unit, or do you have a number in mind, or?
Honestly, I haven't been focused on parking, so I haven't thought that, but that something in that range would seem to make sense.
And leased versus public? You care about that?
I don't care about that.
Okay. And what was the other one?
Ready to pop it up?
The senior, you were okay with that? You know, theoretically, if the
Theoretically, yeah.
area were suitable. And what about the 4-to-1 bonus level for the actual affordable housing?
I think that's you know, in the right range. I think I'd like to check in with Alex again and just see what progress Heinsberg has made on that. See what they and also there's a additional information from the regional planners on that too. So, but yeah, that's the ballpark certainly.
Okay, so we haven't heard, so Allison, would you be willing to consider density bonuses if that were part of the package?
Yes, I agree with a lot of what Chris has just been saying.
Okay,
I think
so
he's made some excellent points.
you would be willing to add that to a package with some increased base density, or?
Yeah, I'm in favor of a lot of these ideas, but at a very conservative level.
Right. Well, has there been anything presented that you would consider not to be a conservative level?
I'm not sure that I could exactly define that right now, but I think that a lot of what Chris has been saying and Mark think of very good points. I think we all would like we'd like everybody to be successful. We would like everybody to have a fair chance, but we want to be realistic about the limitations of the town geographically, and from the point of view of the floodplains and the road structures and the the traffic and whatnot. I've noticed the traffic is already, there are certain times of day that I certainly avoid going even in the village because of the traffic. So I think we have to bear in mind just the basic infrastructure. But at the same time, we don't want to limit the opportunities of and the needs of additional housing and additional programs for people. I guess that's probably not very helpful, but that's just philosophically where I'm at.
Okay. Chris, you have your hand up.
I'm just noting the time.
Yes, very good. Yep, go ahead.
I would like to move that we close tonight's meeting.
Ian up there.
Ian, are you seconding that motion or are you wanting to speak?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I was just gonna throw out there, how about we raise the density to 20 and ask for 30 parking spaces?
You can't ask for it.
No, we can't require, we can't,
In the base.
it has to be a bonus.
Okay. So that's what, if we did 20, then it would be 2 parking spaces per unit.
Okay, 40 spaces.
So you're suggesting that we just offer a density bonus of parking to allow them to get 15 units more. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yep, that's what I'm suggesting. So maybe
I-
Mark would be willing to go along with that.
A point of order, we have an open motion on the floor.
It's
It
only
was not
it's 2 minutes
seconded.
before 9 o'clock.
Okay, but we still, but by Robert's rules, we need to address that. Either we need to dismiss it or second it.
Okay, well, I did not hear a second to the motion.
Okay.
So I think the motion at this moment fails, so. Anyway, so we could think about that and we're gonna have to, I think people are gonna have to try to decide what the way forward is here. What other additional information that we can get that is gonna help us to make this decision. So I think that's where we can leave it. And
Could I just ask that,
Yeah.
I mean, we threw out some numbers and some ratios. Would it be possible to put together like a, I don't know, matrix or something where we can see, okay, this is the benefit. This is how many extra they get for how many whatever they give. You know what I mean? Just something in a table that you can sort of compare all the different numbers to, because trying to think about all of them disjointedly, it's kind of hard to keep track of. But if we could present a table that said, okay, this is what we'll give, this is the density bonus, this is how many points they get for how many units they provide.
you want to work that up, Mark?
I don't know what it is yet. I would, but I mean, then I think from what we have with the conversation today and the notes, hopefully we'll have some better numbers. But if it comes around and it still hasn't like put together by by the end of next week, then yeah, let me know and I will try to sketch something out. Just so we have a frame of mind where we can compare the different offerings and the different perks that we would get in one clean picture.
Mhm.
Yeah, happy to do it. I make those all the time. So, I mean, I could do it if you guys are behind or preoccupied as you always are. You're very busy people. I get it.
Ian?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, um, I think it's important that as commissioners that like we keep track of what our position is and try to be consistent also
Yeah.
going forward. And like, I'm just as guilty of this as anyone else. Like my ideas about the number of units for density and things like that kind of change from week to week with the direction of the conversation. But I think, you know, like it's our responsibility at this point to both the public and to the applicant that like we need to sort of firm up our positions and be a little more transparent or just consistent, I think is the word, so that we can move forward a little more judiciously. So I would just ask that like people keep that in mind
Okay.
going forward. And I think Chris has been very consistent in his point of view. And I don't think I'm sorry he's no longer in the meeting, but I don't think his opinion is going to change. So it
So
may
what
be,
do you see as the way forward here, Ian?
well, like I've been sort of consistent in saying I'm not a big fan of these density bonuses. I would just like to increase the density and let the developer do their project.
Yes.
And I'm pretty flexible in getting to that in general with other people's needs. I think, you know, Mark has expressed some concerns about parking and congestion and just in community impact in general. He's been very consistent about that. So I think, but he's also open to a higher density as long as those issues are addressed. And I think Allison has been, you know, reasonable just in general. So I think we're kind of moving in the direction of getting this done. But every week something else is brought up that kind of muddies the water. And I don't know. I'm not frustrated. I'll keep coming back to these meetings and having these conversations every week. But I think, you know, we have a need for housing and we have an applicant that wants to do a project, and, you know, we're not really doing anybody any favors by continuing to just rehash stuff every week. So that's it.
Okay, well, if you can all think about any further information that you might want or some way to make progress with this, then just let us know when we'll take up the conversation again next week. We do have to do something. It is kind of not good to keep this developer just hanging on. We haven't heard from Buttermilk at all lately, so we don't even know what their situation is at the moment, but moving this forward would be a good
Could I
idea.
just add something to this, Virginia?
Yeah, Allison, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I would just like to say that as much as I am in sympathy with all of the all this work that we are trying to do, I can't help noticing every day how many lives have been disrupted, and I see it all the time at my swimming pool of how many people are struggling just because the road problems that we've had with all these storms, the disruption to everybody's regular life. by the extreme weather situations that we've had, that it's really, it's rather challenging to try to plan something like what we're talking about in this atmosphere where many of us are dealing with some really serious extremes that have had profound effects on us financially, as well as in terms of our even personal safety, in terms of our homes and our roads and everything. And I'm not trying to make a bunch of excuses. I think that this is something that is very unusual for all of us. And it's rather challenging to try to plan. And I'm not saying that we should avoid this, but I'm just trying to express sympathy and compassion for all of us who are having trouble coming up with exact numbers and things during a rather turbulent time. That's all.
Right. Well, that's, a good sentiment, but we do have to continue to do this work. So,
Well, I understand that, Virginia. I think it's hard to, I guess what I'm trying to say is that some decisions are difficult to make under these conditions.
yeah. All right. Well, if you think of any other information that would help us or whatever, then just let us know. I mean, one way or another, we have to make this decision, and we can't keep this developer sort of hanging on forever. That's not fair either. So. All
Yeah,
right, great.
Yeah, right. I understand that too.
Yeah. Anyway, if someone wants to make a motion to adjourn and somebody would like to second it, then we can move on. For our
I'll
next
make a
meeting.
motion to adjourn.
I
Okay.
second it.
Okay, so motion made by Ian, seconded by Mark. Are there any objections to adjourning? Hearing none, this meeting stands adjourned, and we'll see you all on the 21st, and we're going to talk about the Volunteers Green, which is another difficult situation, but we'll talk about that. I'll try to talk to the 3 Parks Committee, or we'll get information about where they stand at the moment on these issues. And see if we can figure out how we're going to move forward with this one that we've just been talking about. So anyway, thank you all for coming. Difficult issues, and as Allison says, difficult times. But we have to try to keep moving forward. So thank you all.
Buenas noches.
Good night.